The rain poured like a broken sky, hammering the hospital roof as if demanding entry, but the small girl standing at the front desk barely noticed. Her shoes were soaked, her thin sweater clung to her trembling body, and her hands, red from cold, gripped a crumpled envelope of coins. Her wide dark eyes stared at the nurse with a desperation that cut sharper than the wind. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My mom, she can't breathe. Please save her. I'll pay anything. I brought everything I have." The nurse hesitated, glancing at the envelope that couldn't have held more than a few dollars. Before she could answer, a tall man in a tailored black suit walked in through the automatic doors, shaking off an umbrella. He was the kind of man whose presence shifted the atmosphere. Quiet, commanding, unmistakably powerful. But when his gaze fell upon the trembling girl, he froze. She looked exactly like someone he once loved and lost. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The same eyes, the same fragile bravery, the same fire buried inside fear. Memories surged through him like ghosts he'd spent years trying to silence. The nurse stepped forward awkwardly. "Sweetheart, the emergency treatment deposit is." "I know," the girl blurted out, voice rising with panic. "But my mom said we shouldn't come here because we can't afford it. I brought this anyway. I'll work, I'll clean. Please, just don't let her die." Her words broke into sobs so raw that even the receptionist looked away. The billionaire, Elias Varron, took a slow breath, fighting the instinctive ache forming in his chest. He walked toward the girl, who stiffened like a cornered animal. "What's your name?" Elias asked, his tone gentle despite the power in it. "Leela," she whispered, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "Leela, take me to your mother." The nurse's eyes widened. Everyone in the city knew who Elias Varron was, the reclusive billionaire who rarely appeared in public. The man had enough influence to buy the hospital twice over if he wished. He didn't owe anyone anything. Yet now he followed the small girl down the hall without hesitation. Leela led him to a room where a woman lay gasping for breath, her face pale, her hair damp with sweat. She looked up in confusion as they entered. "Mom," Leela choked out, "I found someone. He'll help." The woman tried to sit up, but the effort sent a spasm of pain through her chest. Elias took one look and immediately stepped back into the hall, commanding the medical staff with crisp, urgent authority. "Get a respirator in here. Call Drive Sheridan from ICU. And someone get me her file, now." Within minutes the room turned into a flurry of motion. Nurses inserted IV lines, adjusted monitors, stabilized her breathing. Leela clung to the side of the bed, tears streaming but filled with fragile hope. Elias stood in the doorway, watching every movement with an intensity that startled even the doctors. He didn't leave until her breathing steadied and her heart rate normalized. Only when the chaos calmed did he turn to Leela. "She's stable for now," he said softly. Leela sagged with relief, covering her face as sobs escaped her again. Elias hesitated only a second before kneeling beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he murmured. "You saved her." But this was only the beginning of their challenges. Over the next few days, Elias learned the truth. Leela and her mother, Maya, lived in an old, barely furnished apartment. Maya worked 2 jobs and still struggled to afford food and medicine. Leela often skipped meals so her mom could eat. They had no family, no safety net, and no one to call for help. Maya's illness wasn't sudden. She'd ignored the symptoms for months because the hospital bills were impossible. The guilt tore through Elias every time he walked into her room. He didn't know why this family affected him so much. Maybe it was the girl's eyes. Maybe it was the quiet strength in Maya's voice whenever she apologized for being a burden. Maybe it was the simple, cruel truth that money could solve the very suffering they had carried alone. He paid for Maya's treatment without hesitation. But as he spent more time around Leela, something shifted inside him. She began to trust him, though slowly, offering shy smiles, saving him a corner of her mother's get-well drawings, even slipping him a handmade bracelet from colorful threads. "When I'm scared," she told him one afternoon, "I make things. It helps me feel like the world is still good." Elias swallowed hard, brushing his thumb across the bracelet. No one had given him something handmade since he was a child. Still, the challenges were far from over. Maya refused to let him pay more than necessary. She insisted she would pay him back, though her voice trembled every time she said it. She didn't want to owe a stranger, especially one like him. But when she saw how Leela clung to Elias, how her daughter's laughter returned after months of silence, something inside her softened. She still kept a polite distance, yet whenever Elias entered the room, the fear in her features eased just a little. Then came the day everything threatened to fall apart. Maya's condition worsened unexpectedly. Complications formed. The doctors recommended surgery. Expensive, urgent, risky. Maya refused it at first. "I won't drag my daughter through debts she can't escape," she whispered. Elias stepped forward, unable to contain the frustration burning inside him. "Debts," he said sharply. "You think I'm asking for anything in return? Let me help." "You already have," Maya insisted, her voice firm despite the oxygen mask. "You gave my daughter hope again. But I won't let you ruin your life on us." He stared at her, stunned. "Do you really think money matters to me more than saving you?" "Everything has a cost," she whispered. "You know that more than anyone." Her words cut deeper than she intended. He knew she was right. His wealth had cost him relationships, peace, love. But watching Leela sob outside the room, terrified of losing her mother, Elias made a decision he hadn't made in years. He stayed the entire night by Maya's bedside. Not as a billionaire, not as a savior, but as a man who couldn't bear watching two lives unravel. When she woke, he wasn't commanding or cold or distant. He spoke quietly, honestly, about the sister he'd lost, the promises he'd failed to keep, the pain he buried under his empire. And for the first time, Maya saw beyond the suit and money. She saw a man who understood loss as deeply as she did. The next morning, she agreed to the surgery. It was long, complicated, dangerous. Leela sat between Elias and the wall, leaning into him as she cried silently. Elias kept his arm around her the whole time, steady as a stone even though his own heart hammered with fear. Hours later, when the surgeon stepped out with a tired smile and said the operation was a success, Leela collapsed into Elias's arms, sobbing with relief. He held her as though she was something precious, fragile, and yet the bravest soul he'd ever met. Over the next weeks, Maya recovered slowly. Elias visited daily, sometimes helping Leela with homework, sometimes bringing warm meals, sometimes just sitting with them quietly. He stopped feeling like a stranger. He started to feel like part of something he didn't realize he'd been missing. Even so, there were more challenges. Maya struggled with guilt, feeling unworthy of the help, afraid that her weakness was becoming a burden. Leela feared the world would take Elias away once her mother recovered. Elias battled with his own growing attachment, unsure if he had the right to want something more from the fragile world they built together. But small moments chipped away at their fears. Maya smiling for the first time without pain in her eyes. Leela grabbing Elias's hand as they crossed the street, trusting him without hesitation. Elias showing up with groceries and pretending he didn't see the tears in Maya's lashes when she realized she didn't have to choose between rent and food anymore. Slowly, walls broke. One evening, after Maya was discharged and settled at home, Leela tugged Elias into the tiny living room, proudly showing off a drawing she made. It was of the three of them, Maya on one side, Elias on the other, Leela in the middle holding their hands. "This is my family," Leela said simply. Maya's breath caught. Elias felt something inside his chest shift into place, like a door finally unlocking after years of darkness. There were no dramatic confessions, no grand declarations. Just a quiet moment, soft and real, in a home that had known too much struggle. Leela grinned at them both. "Mom says we're supposed to be brave for the people we love. I'm brave now." Elias looked at Maya, and she looked back at him, not with debt, not with fear, but with a warmth that steadied him. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. They still faced obstacles. Maya building back her strength, balancing work, learning to accept help. Leela overcoming the fear of losing the people she loved. Elias navigating a life where he allowed himself to care openly again. But they faced these challenges together. And somehow, that made everything possible. Their story wasn't about wealth or rescue. It was about a girl who refused to give up, a mother who loved fiercely, and a man who rediscovered his heart in the smallest hands he ever held. And in the quiet light of their little apartment, where laughter slowly returned and hope lived boldly again, they became a family, not because they needed each other, but because they chose to. Every single day.